The Penre Papers. A Journey Through the Multiverse. The Second Level of Learning. http://wespenre.com. Humanity's Future, Paper Number 2. Life After the Nano-Second, Part 2. The Dawn of a New Species, A Humanity Without Chains. By Penre, Sunday, October 28, 2012. Revised, Saturday, December 15, 2012 at 12:35 p.m. http://wespenre.com, Part 2. 4. Microcosm and Macrocosm, the Nano-World versus the Material World. These papers have been quite hard to write. Not only because of the subject matters, but because I decided to release them one by one. As soon as a papers was finished, I released it. The problem with that has been that as I've went along, I've learnt more and more. It was not like I knew everything I have written so far already when I started writing. I have found new information and had new epiphanies as I moved on. This has had no negative bearing on any of the previous material, but some of what I wrote in the beginning has been refined as I've continued researching and writing. So is the case, in particular, when comes to the KHAA versus the 4%, and nano travel versus the 3D world. There is so much to say on that subject, and I have only touched the surface. I am sure I could spend a whole series of papers just talking about that, but I leave that for someone else to do. I am sure something of that sort will happen in the near future, anyway, as more and more people will realize that the nano world is the real world. But I want to make a last effort to bring the subject up just one more notch, and then I'll leave it with that. The whole thing needs some kind of conclusion section or summary anyway, because it may seem quite confusing for some. Let's start with taking a look at the following drawing. You can also click on it, and it should open either in a new window or a new tab, depending on which browser you are using. This is if you prefer to have the picture in a separate window/tab to alt/tab between this paper and the picture. You may think it's easier to follow than to scroll up and down on this page while we're discussing the picture. In the flow chart above, the whole thing is explained, hopefully in more visual terms. It can be hard to visualize the whole process otherwise. Of course, this is just a picture, and it has to be drawn this way to make sense for our earthly five senses. In reality, the KHAA is not some kind of realm above our head, it's inside of us and all around us. It's the 96% of reality which, according to scientists, is composed of dark matter and dark energy, although I suggest it's composed of soul energy and has its own entities, dimensions, and densities. Likewise, if we take a look at the physical body, number 33 in the drawing, it says emotional body, something I haven't brought up that much, although it exists more as a composite of the physical body and the avatar. In reality, the fires are attached directly to the avatar. But let's start from the beginning to explain the flow chart. As we can see, reality consists of two major components, the KHAA, the 96%, the void, or the goddess universe, which is the blackness we see when we look up in the night sky, or the space astronauts see when they leave the atmosphere. Although they never really enter the KHAA, they are still floating around in the 4% universe. The KHAA consists of fires, or we may call them oversouls from our perspective, and different dimensions and densities, just like in the 4% universe. In fact, the 4% universe and the 96% are the same thing, it's just that the Sirians have manipulated us into perceiving only approximately 4% of the entire universe. The rest seems dark to us, although in other dimensions, which we need more than 5 senses to experience, space is not dark, but filled with light from stars and galaxies. The KHAA is the goddess energy in her purest form, and within the KHAA, in its highest dimensions, dwell what we would call the angelic beings, in my papers called the builders, and other being of high consciousness. The oversouls depicted in the flow chart, located within the KHAA, represent our main fire, which is the collective information and memories of experiences that the fire in the physical realm has gathered. Lifetime after lifetime, we create our own oversoul with our common experiences of all lifetimes on Earth, Most fires/souls here on Earth started out their existence here and haven't lived anywhere else in the universe, but there are some who came here from elsewhere as teachers over the eons, and got trapped in the recycling system and are still here. Others came here a few lifetimes before the Nano-Second as teachers and entered the material world with the intention to help out during the Nano. The reason they came a few lifetimes before the Nano was because they needed the experience of being human in order to help out to their best abilities. There are millions of those alien souls here on Earth right now. Now, let's go down the flow chart and look within the black sphere, which represents Earth. Let's pretend the physical body you see there on Earth is the body you possess as you're reading this. My picture is very simplistic, but complicated enough to fit the purpose. There are esoteric writings you can read if you want a more sophisticated and complicated description of the body/mind/soul connection, although it's hard to find one that's totally correct. In the drawing, the body is made up of a grayish/bluish field of light, which pretty much follows the structure of the physical body. This is what I call the avatar or the light body. It's made up of soul energy from the 4% universe. Then, we have the emotional body, which is basically the composite of the physical body and the avatar. The blue, bold field surrounding the avatar is the composite of fires that are attached to the avatar. The purple dots attached to the blue field are the individual fires, who come together as one big fire which make up the human mind/soul/body complex. In reality, they are individual fires who are glued into one great fire, which is you. This is a complicated matter, because sometimes we hear voices in our heads, which we have a distinct feeling is not our own, and most of the time we're probably right. They can be the voices of fire fragments communicating in your head, or they can be hitchhikers, unquiet dead, or even demons on rare occasions. If you are a chosen one and of the right bloodline, it could even be an alien being from the Sirian alliance, but that should not be the reader's first suspicion, however. Our chakras were more or less closed down, except the two lower ones, when the Sirians started manipulating us. The dormant DNA has to do with our connection with the outside universe, which exists outside the grid, and ultimately in the KHAA. Now, fortunately, there are holes in the grid so we can take advantage of the upgrade from the gamma rays. This is reconnecting us with the universe again and our junk DNA is getting reactivated as we speak in all humans. The holes in the grid are to some degree natural, in the sense that the grid has deteriorated lately, and the Sirians haven't been able to keep up with it. It mainly deteriorates because we humans are the ones who keep much of the grid in place with our thoughts and our energies and especially our belief systems, and now when we are evolving back to where we once were, as Namlu, the grid can't sustain itself. Also, we have had help from positive ETS, who have assisted us in destroying the grid. According to the Pleiadians in figure 2-2 we can see the grid surrounding Earth. In the space between the Earth's atmosphere and the universe beyond is where the astral plane is located. This is where discarnate soul complexes go after the physical body in 3D has died. This is also where confused souls stay if they don't want to go to the tunnel and the light, and can't even find their way to it. However, most souls, composed of avatar, emotional body and the composite of fires, appearing in the flow chart under the common name, energetic body, go to the tunnel and get sucked in towards the light at the end of the tunnel. While inside, the deceased is met by dead relatives and friends, and what they experience is pretty much based to a large degree on their own belief systems. Not every discarnate energetic body goes to the same place in the afterlife. To be more specific, they actually do, but may experience a slightly different reality from living in a different hologram, with all holograms instigated by the Sirians. So, depending on whom we ask, we are either shot down into a new human body right away, and we have no choice in the matter, or we go through the whole process of setting up new goals for the next lifetime, and lastly, we are implanted with false memories and amnesia before we finally are shot down into a body of choice, correlated with whatever position the zodiac is in when we are born. All this, so we have a better chance to reach our goals, due to the influence the zodiac has on our personality. I personally think that the truth is somewhere in between being shot down immediately and being set up as thoroughly as Dr. Michael Newton suggests in his book, based on 7,000 plus case studies. The problem with hypnosis and regression therapy, as in Dr. Newton's case studies, is that the client can be manipulated from the astral while in session with the therapist, and also, false memories can be downloaded into the client in one big chunk before the energetic body is being shot down into the physical realms again. Isn't that how some data streaming works, after all? Information arrives from someone outside 3D, delivering it into the human brain in whole packages at once, such as in the case of Nadine and the Guardian Alliance. So 7,000 plus case studies doesn't really prove much, unfortunately. I am additionally suspicious because Dr. Newton says that the person's spirit guide is often there with them in the session, putting boundaries to what the client can say to the therapist, even when under deep regression therapy. However, if we are to trust the Pleiadians in this matter, they are more inclined to stick to Dr. Newton's case studies than anything else, although they admit to that the Blad is controlled by the Sirians, Annunaki, Lizzies, or simply the gods with a small g, as they call them. They don't mention Dr. Newton, per se, but the way they explain life after death corresponds quite well with Dr. Newton's studies, with a few exceptions. So you, who are reading this, are the same person you have always been, lifetime after lifetime, from the day you were created by Enki's team. That's when the avatar was created, and the fires of the divine beings of the Khaa were glued together. All this became you. You got stuck in linear time, which is the agreed upon concept how time works on this planet, and because Enki and the Sirians decided that a human body should only be able to reach a certain age and then die, or the Lulus would become too clever and able to figure it all out, you have died several times and lived again in a new body. Every time you get born, you are in the hands of circumstances, such as genetics of your parents, environment, and level of indoctrination. This is why your personality may change drastically from one lifetime to another. From being a Mother Teresa figure in one lifetime, you may be the worst criminal in the next. Now, time on Earth is just a consideration and a mass agreement, it's not really how time works. All time is simultaneous, and therefore all lifetimes you've experienced, which all seem to be in the past, are happening now, in the present. This is why I've stressed that in the Nano-Second, 1987 to 2012, we have had the chance to heal along the lines of time, i.e. heal all our previous, and future, incarnations. If we do so and patiently and bravely meet the challenges we have in this lifetime, we are healing our past and future, because now, at the end of a cycle, the so-called end time, all timelines merge, and the problems you had, let's say 600 years ago, are popping up in front of you in this lifetime, causing you problems without your knowing why it pops up and where it comes from. Resolve them, and you resolve the main negative impact your previous incarnations have had, and will have, on you in the future. If you manage to do this, you go into the future with a clean slate and can start a life without the heavy baggage you've had to carry lifetime after lifetime because of inner conflicts and unresolved issues. This is why it's important to confront the dark side of ourselves as well, because that's where your freedom lies. Release what's there, and apply the 6 heart virtues 8 to them, and they will dissolve, from have been accumulated ridges of energy in your current, and previous bodies. Your body will feel lighter and your mind so much clearer. You will become a happy human being, able to hold your frequency in spite of what is happening around you, most of the time, at least, because you have very little left which will trigger negative emotions in you. Eventually, your previous lifetimes, one by one, will be resolved within the short breath of this current lifetime, which is an incredible opportunity and achievement, if completed, and you will become whole. This will even work with people who do not have this information, if they are prone to being problem solvers and are persistent in resolving the problems that show up in their lives. If we see them all as learning lessons, it's easier to look at the dark sides of ourselves as well, without feeling shame or guilt, which both are very destructive feelings. And remember above everything else on this subject, never hold grudges, and forgive yourself and others. That will change you, even if it doesn't necessarily change the persons you forgive. But that's their problem, not yours. This is very important to keep in mind. Once you're a whole being again, so to speak, you will see a whole lot of opportunities open up rather than a whole lot of problems. You will more so become the master of your own reality, and you will much easier be able to anchor your thoughts into your reality and make them come true. This can be tricky at first, because that means that when you think negative thoughts, those may manifest as well. So again, no sloppy thoughts. The next time our body dies, we will have an immediate choice, something I brought up earlier. We can either go into the tunnel and be recycled again with full amnesia, or we can return to Earth by taking a new baby body, without first going to the amnesia station to help building the new Earth. Or lastly, we can, like the energetic body in the top section of figure 2-2, slip through a hole in the grid and leave Earth once and for all, and find our luck somewhere else. We will have access to all those dimensions that we so far have only heard of but not really experienced, and use our avatar to manifest in realities you encounter on your multiversal journey. The only problem with doing this is that you miss out on having a physical, multidimensional body like that of a human divine being. You are still divine and can visit wherever you want, but there is a big chance you will miss the physical realm after a while. Or maybe you won't, it's all individual. And of course, you can take a baby body on any planet you want and become a part of another soul group, or try your luck later here on Earth, although it's going to be harder and harder to get a body here in the future when the population is less and there are many fires in line, wanting a body here. There are many universes, as explained in the second and third paper of the second level of learning, and each being in any of these many universes contributes to letting the goddess experiencing different life scenarios. Every thought you think and every move you make is helping the goddess and yourself expand, and thus the multiverse expands with you. We have been trapped here for hundreds of thousands of years and been deprived of our birthright, which is to explore the multiverse from a multidimensional human body, and now it's time for us to reclaim who we are so we can enjoy what was created for us. This must be done peacefully and by expanding ourselves from the inside. We are very, very close to making it, but make sure you stay away from channeled so-called angelic beings, or higher dimensional beings who seduce you with a harvest package. It would be so sad if we've come this far, and when we are just about to take our first baby steps into joining the galactic community, we would fall into another trap like that. I don't wish that for anybody. 5. The Aryan/Sirian Peace Agreement Revisited. The mechanics which involve how the Sirian overlords can keep the 4% universes gridlocked is unknown to me, I just know they do. Sometime in the ancient past, they must have found a way, with technology, I presume, to control the energy in these universes. The fact that they have not been able to gridlock all 4% universes indicates that either the goddess stopped them somewhere along the line, and they are no longer able to expand their kingdom in that direction and are now instead aiming for the KHAA, or the Sirians haven't had the chance yet. Perhaps it's just a matter of time? I understand that there is a piece in my research that is missing here, because something apparently happened from when the Sirians first ran into the Aryan Empire until they landed on Earth. The missing time is apparently when they figured out how to steal the energy. After all, they were already technologically advanced, much more so than most other young races like them. Well, much more than most other races, period. It always made me wonder why the Orion Queen was so concerned about this younger star race if her empire was as solid as it's said to be, and so much more technologically advanced than that of the Sirians. One option could be that the Sirians, already when they ran into the Aryans, were about to take over this universe and others, and perhaps they are not such a young race after all, which would make more sense. Perhaps the Queen was nervous that the Sirians, with their advanced weapon industry, would fight her off and force her to return to the KHAA, unable to keep her physical manifestation in this universe. Therefore, she felt she needed to show off as being more technologically advanced than she was. Maybe she hadn't had the reason to build a weapon industry as advanced as that of the Sirians, because she was no longer on offense. Her concern was to defend her empire. So now she noticed she couldn't compete with the warlords, and manipulated the mind of the Sirian King of Kings, and had him see something that didn't exist, and whatever it was, it made him so scared and impressed that he decided to negotiate with the Queen. It resulted in the peace agreement, which included quite a few business marriages between the two star races, the Sirians staying away from Peshmetan, and in exchange, the Sirians would always have backup from Orion if they were ever to be attacked. Additionally, the Sirians were given parts of the Queen's empire to use for their own expansion. Also, the Sirians were made her advanced guards. Once the Queen had the King sign, she knew her position in this universe was guaranteed at least long enough for her to tighten her stronghold here. The peace treaty, and what happened before and after, raises a lot of questions that I need to address, because I'm sure a lot of readers will think about these things as well, and I want to make sure you know I have thought about them, but don't necessarily have any real answers. So the following has to be viewed as pure ideas and speculation. I find it disturbing that the Queen promised to fight side by side with the Sirians against their enemies. This means, in reality, that whoever is attacking the Sirians will have backup from the Queen and her empire. This makes little sense to me, but this has been backed up by all my sources as being the case, because how can the Sirians be stopped if that is so? As soon as a good-hearted star race, who wants peace and freedom, is forced to fight off this evil star race, the Aryan Empire will fight on the side of the oppressors, because the freedom fighters automatically become the enemies of the Sirians. All the Sirians need to do to have the Queen back them up is to refer to the peace agreement. If the Queen of the Stars is the embodiment of the Mother Goddess, why would she sign such a contract? Of course, something is wrong with that picture, and there is information missing here. My next question is, why would the Sirians be able to relatively easily fight off the Aryans so they had to leave Earth in the hands of these oppressors? And the Aryans never returned to take back what they lost. The thing is that Orion didn't lose just any solar system to the Sirians, they lost our solar system, where her great experiment was going on. It was obviously important to her, so why didn't she return? Another unanswered question is why she gave away this subsector of her empire, where the experiment with the living library was taking place. It was a part of the agreement that this subsector of Sector 9 was given to the Sirians to explore and consider their own. Queen Nekht is very clever, so why couldn't she foresee that the Sirians would interfere with her experiment? After all, she knew their mentality. Well, there is actually some evidence that she actually predicted it, and she and her helpers put a code in the Nano-US DNA, which could not be decoded by anyone beside herself. This code had to do with that whatever happens, no interference or manipulation can stop us humans from evolving and become multi-D. This code also involves us being the guardians of the living library. All the extended knowledge that is embedded in our DNA has been encoded and hidden, and the code impossible for the Sirians to break, in spite of their trying very hard. It is my conviction that Enki and the Sirians kept the Nano-U DNA in many humans because they wanted the code, and still do, fortunately for us. For this to make sense, it couldn't have been that the Queen foresaw that the Sirians in particular would destroy her experiment, but the code was put in the Nano-US DNA for all eventualities. If a star race sometime in the future would interfere with her experiment, the code was there to protect not only our ancestors, and eventually us, but also the living library, over which the Nano-U were the guardians. The question remains, why did the Queen let the Sirians have a sector of her empire which to her was so precious? Or was the agreement written in such a way that the Sirians misinterpreted it and believed they had ownership of our solar system? This is not plausible, either, because somewhere along the line, they would have found out they were wrong, and that would have been before the War of the Titans. Things could have been explained, and matters cleared up before it went so far that the Sirians fought off all Aryan influence from our planet. It makes me think that either the Sirians actually did have the rights to our planet, or the agreement could be interpreted both ways. We don't know. What we know, however, is that the codes we inherited from the Nano-U has kept us safe, because the Sirians have tried hard to break the code, and they have still not given up. This has caused us a lot of pain and misery, but it has helped us survive as a species. The evidence of a code is again coming from the Pleiadians 9, who independently back up that information. They are talking a lot about how the original planners, the Aryans and the founders who helped the mother goddess seed Earth, lost the war and the Lizzies took over about 500,000 years ago. Furthermore, they talk about the code that was put into the human DNA before the Sirians came. I need to add here that the majority of information in these papers doesn't come from the Pleiadians at all, but they have helped me enormously, because they have time after another verified and confirmed the information I have discovered elsewhere. They have done so in their books and lectures. And I know for a fact that the Pleiadians don't know about my sources, and most of my major sources actually don't know about the Pleiadians, either. Still, if it's true that the Queen did the above, it suggests that the Sirians were superior when came to warfare, and that the Queen knew it. There is another reason why Enlil and his team were allowed to land on Earth. They were the advanced guards of the Queen, and as such, they were allowed to travel anywhere within the Aryan Empire, to which our solar system belonged before the Sirians won the war and took over. It now officially belongs to the Sirian Empire. I can see that as being a possibility, but we still have the peace agreement to take into consideration. The Sirians were allowed to expand their empire in this subsector of the galaxy. This means that they were allowed to claim Earth as their planet. And that makes sense, because one very reliable source has told me that Enlil was very disturbed and angry when he saw the Namliu and the Titans being situated here on the King of Kings planet. So there are still questions that need answers here. A third thing I have been pondering is why the Queen and the Aryans have let the Sirians go on for so long here on Earth, and of course, elsewhere, if the Aryan Empire is so powerful. Again, it must have to do with that the Sirians are superior in warfare, and the Queen is holding back so she can keep her position in the 4% as a physical manifestation of herself. This is the only answer I can find to this question. It all comes back to the same thing. The Aryan Empire is not as technologically advanced as the Sirian Empire. And lastly, and this question may actually have a quite satisfactory answer, when the Queen told Enki to start a new experiment, why did he do it on Earth, where his stepbrother had such a stronghold and was acting in such a violent manner? We know that Prince Ea somewhere along the line started working with his brother and his father, but the question is, did the Queen suggest that her son started the new experiment on Earth, or was this Ea's own plan? There are indicators that this was Prince Ea's idea, and that the Queen wanted him to start it elsewhere, away from Lord Enlil and the Sirian occupants, but at the same time, if we humans have the code embedded in our DNA, and I really think we do. In fact, I'm pretty sure, why would he start the experiment elsewhere? The code, when broken at the right time, which is now, in the nanosecond and after, has to do directly with Earth, the living library. So, I don't see how EA could have taken the experiment elsewhere. Therefore, it's much more plausible that the Queen actually asked Prince Ea to take her experiment to Earth and develop her new star race here. She knew it would be a very tough, and often heartbreaking thing to do, knowing how the Sirians are and how they oppress their slave races, but putting us here was the only way to save the living library. The Queen knew we would suffer in the hands of the Sirians, but it was the price she, and we humans, have had to pay to be able to re-establish ourselves as the guardians of the living library now when the Namliu are gone. However, Ea was his father's son and took the experiment in a totally different direction, far from how the Queen wanted it to be, but perhaps the Queen foresaw this as well, knowing that Ea would rather follow his stepfather's directions than hers, but again, this was the only way to do it, and there would still be a slim chance that the experiment would succeed, in spite of Enki's betrayal and the Sirian domination. I feel this is quite close to the truth. Much of the above is brought up here because I am hearing from many sources that the Aryan Empire is more or less unbreakable and much superior to the Sirian. If I were to hold that position as well, my papers wouldn't make sense. So this section must be seen as a disclaimer to the information available to us humans today. In spite of that, the sources we have available to us are telling us differently. The Aryan Empire is not unbreakable, and everything points in the direction that the Sirians are technologically stronger than the Aryans, although the Aryans may be stronger in many other, more important ways. I see no problem with this, because really, what is wrong with that? I understand that the information I have had available to me, and which overall is the information that absolutely seems most plausible of all information out there, for different reasons want to put Orion before Sirius when comes to being most technologically powerful, but if the facts show differently, we need to stick to what the facts indicate. And let's think about it. Many people believe that God, or the goddess, or whomever they think is the prime creator, must be all-knowing. This is not true. If this would be the case, why then did the goddess create the 4% universes for parts of herself to explore and experience in order for her to get to know herself? Therefore, it's no contradiction that the Sirians very well can be more technologically advanced than the Queen. They have learned something new, which would only be possible if the goddess let her creations create freely. Some of the above questions I have is just missing information and not a big deal. The only thing that really bothers me is, why did the Queen promise to back up the Sirians against their enemies, which would most of the time be our friends? I hope that one day I will get an answer to this question. Often the answer is so simple that it's overlooked, so we'll see. The last paper in the second level of learning will be a continuation of this paper, suggesting more solutions to problems we are facing and which I have described. And of course, use discernment when reading it, and feel if it resonates with you or not. The third level of learning, which will be the last, is planned to be pure spiritual/metaphysical, where I'll be sharing my own thoughts on these subjects, most of it not being backed up by references or evidence. It will be purely subjective, and for the reader's consideration only. 5.1 Update on the Aryan/Sirian Peace Agreement. This update is made on November 20, 2012. I have actually found out the answers to many of the questions I had in section 5 above, and it's not pretty. I now understand what happened way back when and how the Sirian effectively, at that time, stopped the Aryans from saving us from the warlords. Here were a few questions I had, and they are followed by the answers. I have carefully reviewed my research files and found them there, embedded in so much more information I have on this whole subject. 1. Why didn't the Queen of the Stars come back with an extended fleet to chase the Sirians away and thus save the humans? Answer: she did, but when her fleet arrived, the Sirians used the early humans as shields, and if the Aryans had attacked, most humans would have been killed. The Queen tried to avoid that her first experiment, the Nano-World, would be destroyed, but unfortunately, the Sirians destroyed it later anyway, so the strategy failed. The Nano-World understood the Queen's rationale, and that there wasn't much she could do at the moment. So it wasn't out of negligence but out of compassion for her creation, something the Sirians have never shown. 2. Why doesn't the Queen of Orion intervene now? Answer: I have hinted at this before, but let's bring it up again. If the Aryan would come and try to take over the Stargates, or in any way intervene even if it's within the guidelines of the law of free will, we humans, in our ignorance, would see Orion as our enemy and fight on the Sirian side. The Queen knows what's going on here, but she is waiting to see which path humankind will choose. Everything would be so much easier if we humans woke up from our manipulated state and stopped agreeing with being slaves to the Sirians. If we broke that manipulation, we would get enormous support from star beings out there. Also, humans are so afraid to lose their material standards, that even if they knew the truth, most would probably stay with the Sirians in order to keep their current comfort level, not understanding that the change and the fear of loss is temporary, and what is waiting on the other side is a golden age. But only if the Sirians are out of the equation. 3. Are the Sirians more technologically advanced than the Aryans? Do they have a better war industry? Answer: the Sirians, since a long time back, have invested most of their research in the war industry. That's where they have their focus because they are invaders. However, the advanced technology we are so impressed by, is Aryan technology that the Sirians got from Orion when they were advanced guards to the Queen, and some of it they stole from Orion. The most advanced technologies are basically not their own inventions. 4. In the peace treaty, why did the Queen of Orion say she would back up the Sirians in case they went to war, and that Orion would fight side by side with the Sirians against all Sirian enemies? Answer: I researched this further and happened to find the answer to this as well. The Queen did not promise to fight on the side of the Sirians. She told the Sirian King of Kings that she would back up his star race on the condition that they do not interfere with any other star race without that star race's consent. In fact, she was empathizing love and compassion. One of the reasons for the peace treaty was that the Aryan Queen wanted peace in Sector 9. She knew that if she didn't do something, there was going to be war. Did it help? To a certain degree it did, as it probably halted the Sirians, but they found ways around the agreement by using advanced manipulation on ignorant star races like humankind. So they got the consent by manipulation, without breaking the contract. The thing is that humankind is in danger. If we side with the Sirians in the future and attack or challenge Orion so that the Queen has to react, we must be considered the enemies of Orion. Not because the Queen wants to fight us, but because we make the decision to fight her. 5. Why did the Sirians think that Earth was theirs to begin with? Answer: the idea that the Queen gave this part of Sector 9 to the Sirians was Robert Morningsky's interpretation in his early work. That's not what happened. However, what she did do was to make them her advanced guards, which means they could travel freely within the Aryan Empire, of which we were part at that time. Now the Sirians claim Earth as part of the Sirian Empire, due to that they took over real estate Earth in a battle a long time ago. The Sirian mentality is that they think that everything is theirs. So, being advanced guards to the Queen of the Stars made them, in their own mind, divine, and they could do whatever they wanted. They have their own rationale. By rights, however, it should now be our planet, the squatter's right, and the Queen agrees. So the Sirians needs our consent to operate here, and through manipulation, they have it. The Queen would only interfere if we asked her to help us. She would, because apparently she still cares for the experiment, even if it's a watered-down version of it. Namlu was her experiment. When the Sirians came and manipulated the DNA of existing species here and mixed their own genes with that of the first experiment, and upon all had the Namlu leave their bodies in a mass exit, not much was left of what once was. But mankind still has the fire and the ability to become the guardians of the living library. The above makes a lot of sense to me, and I am glad I could sort it out, both for myself and the readers. I hope it answers some questions for you as well.